Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another Wolfram Language Design Review. This is for MCP server system. So, um, uh, we are setting up our various APIs that support AIs so that they are easily callable from systems that support this. I've now forgotten what the M stands for. Context protocol. What does M stand
Model
for?
context protocol.
Oh yeah, model context protocol. Um, all right. So let's take a look at what it looks like. So in install MCP server.
So this is like the most basic use case. You say what the name of the application you want to install it for. So currently I've only had support for two of them, Cloud Desktop and Cursor. More can be easily added though. But if you omit the second argument, it just installs a default predefined Wolfram MCP server that I made. So then you
You
just
mean the first argument? If you remove the first argument, if you just say MCP install MCP server open close, is that right?
No, open close won't do anything because it has to know where you want to install it for. So
Okay.
Cloud Desktop has a configuration file that this needs to write to, so it knows how to call the MCP server.
Okay.
So you say, I want it for Cloud Desktop, you run it, and it installs the default Wolfram MCP server for it. And then next time you start Cloud Desktop, it just has access to these tools. Like
So
you
you
can,
have to restart Claude Desktop. It doesn't, there's no refresh or something. Is that correct?
um, yeah, I think you need to restart it. Cursor lets you refresh while it's running, but I don't think Cloud will.
Okay. All right. So you have an account somehow with us, and then you're installing. I'm fairly confused. What's going on here? So this is setting it up so that you're purely using our cloud. That Code Desktop is calling a
Well,
cloud proxy
this
endpoint.
is for local MCP. So when you run this, it sets up Cloud Desktop so that it's calling a local Wolfram engine that's running persistently. So it can use like the Wolfram Language Evaluator tool and keep like a running session, things like that.
When does the engine get started?
As soon as you start up Cloud Desktop, if you have this enabled.
Okay. And what actually is it? Is it a straight Wolfram engine, or what is the thing?
It's a Wolfram engine with some initialization code to start up an MCP server using my Paclet code.
Okay, so let's say that I am just random person out there. I don't have any of our tech, and I want to get this. What do I get?
Um, so you do need to have a Wolfram engine installed first to use this method.
Okay, what else do I need to install? Then I just do that Paclet install?
Or you could just use the Paclet symbol from the Paclet repository, click to copy. Like if you scroll up and go to main, the documentation link there. Yeah. If you just copied and pasted that first thing there, that would handle all of the Paclet stuff for you. So you just evaluate that one thing, and assuming that you have Cloud Desktop installed, it'll just work.
Is that it? Or is that something completely different? What am I about to find?
I think that's it.
That's it, Stephen. But like you haven't launched it yet, so yeah.
Oh, for God's sake. No. No, no, no. Okay.
But this is the part that Rick can demo if
Yeah, all right, okay, but I'm trying to understand. So what do we tell people to, so they have to download Wolfram Engine, then, but this is also calling out to Wolfram Alpha, right?
Depending on which tools get called, yeah.
Right, but it can, right? But
Yes.
how is that authenticated?
Wolfram Alpha calls from the Wolfram engine are just using the Wolfram Alpha function, which I believe are signed so that they work. I'm not 100% sure, but I think because you're calling it from a Wolfram kernel, you don't need like an API key.
Okay, but
But
so
to
the
get the
idea here
most
is
functionality of this, you do want an LLM kit subscription. This will still work without it, with some more limited functionality, but you get the most out of it with LLM kit.
why?
So things like the documentation rag and Wolfram.
Well, let's not provide something which is kind of subpar. I mean, let's just say that what you need is this, and here's what it is. But then how do they get it? Because that's something else, right? That's not just download, there's downloading the engine from this place and the this from that place and so on. Don't we need an installer for the whole thing then?
Ideally, yeah, that would be nice. Like if we
Right.
just had one
So why don't
installer
we,
package that
what's that?
if we had like one installer package that would set up Wolfram Engine for you, and then at the end, um, it would check your LLM Kit subscription, and then you'd have like checkboxes maybe saying, I want this set up for Cloud Desktop and Cursor and Visual Studio Code and whatnot. Just some stuff that we support.
Well, and then I don't quite understand. If you were um let's say that we have a web page that says we support the following, we've made arrangements with these companies to support their things. And then how do you like you can run in a notebook, but then you've got to start up all this stuff. How could you just run? We could presumably have something which plugs into Wolfram Engine where you're just pressing a button on essentially a web page to enable each of these things. Is that a true statement?
You would still have to download something
No, no,
because
no. I understand that. But let's say you've downloaded it, but now you want to enable it for some random other product
right.
where
So let's say you are signed in on the web to your Wolfram ID or whatever. We had a site that knows who you are. Your Wolfram engine knows who you are. And then on that website, you can say, I want to add, Cloud Desktop or whatever. But we'd have to have a way for that Wolfram engine to start up so it can install itself in the right place. Because the way it currently works, it's not going to get started until whatever program
okay.
it's configured for will
Let,
start it.
let me make the comment that I think we have the wrong people here because if we're going to have installers and things like that, that's a whole. I mean, on Node, you can perhaps speak to that, but we need
well,
people
I
who.
think it's the wrong way around. I think Wolfram Engine should just include this MCP server Paclet, and then we're done, right? And then you just get Wolfram Engine, and you can just give the install MCP server command, and you're in business. I mean, it's like it seems weird to just reverse all that. Right, this is just a Paclet. This is a Wolfram language Paclet, right? It should just be part
Yeah.
of our product line. Like, we
Well, but
don't.
don't you then have to start? Look, it's very do-it-yourself. This is intended for people who never need to see any of our technology raw. They're going to see it through an LLM. So asking them to start up a notebook and type install MCP server is just deadly.
I think this particular packlet is primarily for people who do already have our product installed.
But that's not what we were saying, because we're saying you can get a Wolfram engine that does this.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah, that's definitely an
I,
option, but I think
I agree that that's a
The
different
first
discussion.
use is
though,
going to
Rudy, but
be,
that's
yeah.
not, yeah, that's not this. Because if you look at the web page and you look under scope, right, it's really heavily, Wolfram language focused, right? Like
I know, which is not the right thing. It's not what we're looking for. I mean, what we're looking for is something that people can install and use in consumer products without having to get deep into layers of technology.
Well, I mean, it's also extremely useful for Wolfram language developers. Like this
Right.
is already part of my workflow. Like I'm using this for
All
real.
right, so that's a separate thing. But that's okay. So we've got
That's kind of our
this.
first step here.
Okay, but I'd like to understand what the second step is.
Open the scope section down at the bottom there. This is what Arnold was just talking about for like the Wolfram language user that really wants to customize.
Okay, but that's customizing MCP servers. That's like 3 layers down in what we care about, right? The number one thing is you've got our generic MCP endpoints with the RAG and Wolfram Alpha and all this kind of thing, and you just want to use them inside Claude Desktop or some other, LLM system, right? That's the number one thing we have to support.
Yep.
All of this stuff about building your own Prime Finder is like totally, that's millions of miles away as far as I'm concerned. Or am I missing something here?
Well, it's not millions of miles away. It's right here.
I know, but I don't think people are going to care about it. This is not the number one use case. The 99% use case is I just want to make my LLM system smarter. Not I want to
Right.
build some custom API. Right. So let's not worry. I mean, it's great that we can build a custom API, but the number one thing is I want to plug something in that just makes my LLM smarter. How do I do that? What's the shortest path to doing that?
We're working on that separately. That's not part of this review.
Well, I think that's what we need to emphasize here.
I mean, that's coming, but that's not this Paclet. That's something totally different. This is running it locally. You have a Wolfram engine. You want to do agentic things with your files and whatnot.
Yeah. But I thought we were going to have a consumer product that does this, that you can install. It has an installer, and it
Right,
then just unfurls itself, and it's ready to be a consumer product.
We will, but it's not based on this Paclet. This Paclet is aimed at the Wolfram language developer who's got the product and wants to expose their custom endpoints to their LLM usage.
But nobody's going to build custom endpoints. I mean, except us as developers.
I don't think even the custom endpoints is the primary use case here. Like the predefined named ones, I think is going to be suitable for most people.
Okay.
Even the Wolfram language developers.
Okay. So what I mean, so in other words, what you're showing me here is already something
That's just a nice bonus that if you do want to write your own custom LLM tool and use it with this, it'll just work.
Okay, fine. Okay, so what is the main flow that I should look at?
It's really just that very first input in the examples that just sets it up. So if you change Claude Desktop to cursor, it does the same thing except for cursor. And then that gives you access to like the RAG and the evaluation tool.
Okay, so this knows there is a table somewhere that tells the MCP server which is a local web browser. Is that true? It's a local Apache server or something. Is that true?
No, it doesn't use any networking stuff at all. It just uses standard input and standard output.
Oh, okay. Okay. So then this is running some little sort of little program. So Claude is calling some little program, sending stuff on standard in, getting stuff on standard out. Is that a true statement?
Yeah. And
So
actually,
when it gets an image, it'll get a pile of binary CRUD on standard out. Is that correct?
so I haven't implemented this yet, but you can send multimodal content. But what I am doing is it's doing the same sort of like markdown serialization that Notebook Assistant uses. So it's not going to get a giant binary blob for an image. It gets a small text representation of it right now, but I can add support for multimodal content. I just haven't done that yet.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it sounds like a worthwhile thing to do. But and then will it refer to assets elsewhere, or will it have the assets in line?
It's kind of client dependent. So there's something called resources in MCP that that it's pretty inconsistent with how clients make use of that, if they do at all. Most of them don't. So I can like create a resource representing an image or a file or something like that in MCP and send it back. And it's just like a URI, like a pointer to it.
Mhm.
But it's totally up to the client how to make use of that. And I haven't seen any consistency with that, so I'm not sure it's worth pursuing yet.
Okay. Well, okay. So let's just walk through this again. So I mean, this line 1 here would just work given a Wolfram engine if you start a notebook, right? It's a Paclet symbol. It would install the right things. It would do the right things. It would just work, correct?
Yes, if you have somewhere to paste in Wolfram language code and run it, it just works from there.
Okay, but now with the Wolfram script, we could literally say, we could just have a script that just says, Wolfram install MCP, and then its argument is just Claude desktop, and it would just do it. We just run this. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's, that way we can, if you are command lining it, that's what you can do. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yep.
I mean, that should be utterly trivial to write. Like 3 lines of Wolfram
Yeah,
script.
that would be pretty easy.
So I mean, that at least means you don't have to start a notebook and understand how to do all this stuff.
Right.
Okay, but meanwhile, and I mean, our node's point about downloading Paclets is kind of moot, because as soon as you do that install thing, it's going to download the Paclet, right? On
Yeah.
node. Yeah.
Actually, if you go back to the other notebook and scroll down a little bit, just below the first screenshot on the left there. So you can actually see what it runs when Claude Desktop starts up the Wolfram engine as an MCP server. It's running the Wolfram kernel with those arguments, and that run argument is just the Paclet symbol for start MCP server. So
yeah. Go ahead.
if you had the Wolfram engine installed, but you didn't even have this Paclet, if you were to paste in this, configuration into your Claude JSON file, this would also just work without ever having to interact with the Paclet.
Does Claude have a control panel where you do that?
No. So they do for remote MCP servers. It's very limited though. So all you can do is paste in a URL and a name. They do show you information about your local MCP servers once you have them, but they don't have a nice UI for entering them in. Cursor does.
I see. So okay. But so we would support, so I mean, for each one of these things, we're going to have a page, and it's going to describe for each company we've interacted with, for each company where this is all set up, we'll have something where it'll say, here's how you set it up. What was the name that we're using for this? This is the local, what is the name we're using for this technology case? Local MCP server, or what is
This
it
is
called?
the fully local.
Yeah.
Okay. So this will say for local MCP server, this is what you do for this product, this product, this product. And Okay, so what should we be looking at in this design review? I mean, you've got a create MCP. No, you've got an install MCP server. What's the difference between? Okay,
So create MCP server is when you're making a custom one. So that's for like the Wolfram language developer that wants to write their own tools or whatever, which I think is going to be a minority, but it's
yeah,
there.
okay. So install MCP server is going to have pages or have some continually updated page that lists the different products into which you can install into which the MCP server can be plugged.
Yeah, we would have that documented somewhere.
Okay.
Like another one would be VS Code. I think VS Code can also run this.
Yeah, that uses a slightly different format for the JSON file. I have a branch for support for it, but I just haven't merged it yet.
Okay.
But from what I've seen, all the clients that I've looked at so far at least have very similar configurations and don't require like anything totally wild to get it to work. But I haven't looked at all of them, just some of the popular ones.
Okay. MCP server object. What is that?
So that is basic. So when the MCP server starts, like from that configuration file that I was mentioning before, it needs to be able to retrieve the right information to start serving the right stuff. So if you look at the environment variables, MCP server name, Wolfram, that's the one that is going to be starting. That's just the default server that I have predefined. But if you created your own, called it my MCP server or whatever, it would say that. And the reason that there are MCP server objects is they have to be something that's persistent from one kernel session to another, so that the next time you start up Cloud Desktop, it knows how to find the definition of whatever MCP server you're looking for.
And so how are those persistent? Where are they persisting?
In your local base.
Okay, fine. So this is using the persistence location mechanisms and so on.
I didn't use any like the persistence functions directly, but it's in a similar.
Why didn't you use the persistence functions?
Because I needed like directory access, so it's not just one file for each of those. So each of them is a directory. So one of the files is like a metadata file saying what's in it. Another one stores definitions, like if you wrote like custom functions or whatever. Another one is a log, so you can figure out
Okay.
what might be going wrong.
Okay.
And this is stuff that's not implemented, but stuff that
What is
we
this?
should probably figure out. So I think we also want to be able to go the other way around. So let's say you have an MCP server from just some other MCP server. It's not like a Wolfram engine based one. Like let's say, for example, you want to access the GitHub MCP server from Wolfram language.
Okay.
And this is just ideas of how we could do that. So
But that ultimately goes into the LLM tool. It's something like an LLM tool. Is that correct?
yeah, so if you expand that subsection, man it or WL as an MCP client, I think. Yeah, so this is my idea. So after you've registered an MCP server representing some external one, one possible idea is you could pass it in as the tools on your LLM evaluator, and LLM synthesize would just work. We could also populate the UI for available LLM tools for chat notebooks.
Yeah. Seems sensible to me. I mean, it seems, but I don't think MCP server object is necessary. What is usually on the right-hand side of tools?
So it would be a list of LLM tool expressions. The problem is an MCP server can expose multiple tools, and you can have multiple MCP servers at a time.
So what's the difference? So an MCP server object needs no other information, unlike an LLM tool, which needs some information about how to call it and so on.
Yeah, so we don't need to do anything there that's already defined by MCP. So MCP will give us the names of the tools, descriptions, the schema for the arguments, and then we just pass that information on.
Yeah, this seems quite sensible to me. Okay. What's next here? This is looking good. I mean, look, okay. Let's just walk through again the kind of what it looks like. We believe we want to have a simpler than LLM kit subscription for this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
So if you choose the local MCP server option, then how does it work? You log in, you get a Wolfram ID, then you download. I mean, normally, when you get a Wolfram engine, how does that work? You get a Wolfram ID, you download the bits, then it activates itself with the Wolfram ID, correct?
Yeah, so like when you start it up, I mean, those command line options you can pass to like activate it with like a code or whatever. But if you don't do that and you start it up, it asks you to activate and gives you like a web link to visit.
Okay, so we could do the exact same thing here, so long as we can get an installer built for this object, which is what I think we should do.
Yeah, a simplified version of an installer and an activator.
Right, and then
That goes
this
along with the plan.
becomes the thing we were earlier calling our agent tools, right? This is one
Yeah.
deployment method for agent tools.
Yeah, that would be yep.
Local MCP server deployment for, agent tools.
I think this is kind of the more advanced use case if you want to do the evaluation locally. But the
Exactly.
easier use case would be a small installer that would do the evaluation with our evaluate endpoints.
What happens if you want both installers? What happens? Do they step on each other? How does that work?
I think if you have the local one and it works, I
should
think
use it.
you don't want the remote one.
Right.
It's going to be exposing the same or the same tool names rather. It's just that when you're running it locally, you have a lot more features available. Like being able to access files and having, persistence.
Let's see. Okay. Well, what else do we have to figure out?
I think that's pretty much it. Like the main thing was how we go forward with the register MCP server, if that even makes sense as a concept and name.
That's to register an external MCP server, right?
Yeah.
For use with chat books.
Or
Right. I mean, that's
or with-
basically what that's doing is the same thing that, for example, Claude Desktop is trying to do with us.
Right.
yeah.
And so, but they don't have a registration mechanism. They just are searching in a directory. Is that correct? That when they restart, they forage the directory and see what's there. Is that right?
Well, when they restart, they read in that JSON file and then run any commands that are specified for local MCP servers to start them up and make sure that they're responding properly. So it isn't like a directory-based thing.
Sorry, say that again. What?
So it's not like a directory-based thing. It's like a particular JSON file. It looks at any things that are declared there as local MCP servers. It runs the relevant command that they specify to start them, and then checks to make sure that they're responding properly.
No, I understand that. But what we're doing here in the install MCP server, which is we are installing an MCP server that is going to whose client is in that case Claude Desktop, right? And Claude Desktop knows that this MCP server has been installed by the fact that it is looking in its application support directory to find JSON files that it can forage to go see what MCP servers it has access to, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so our analog of that is when we say register MCP server, that is producing a that's something which is in our local object store.
Right. It's like a WXF file in a directory instead of using some.
Right. And so what we will be doing is foraging that directory where we've registered, where all our registered MCP servers their specifications will live in that directory, right?
Yeah.
And how do you unregister? How do you get a list of MCP servers? How do you unregister? The usual kinds of questions.
So there's MCP server objects, which will currently it gives you the ones that you've created, but if we have a register MCP server, it'll also give you the ones that you've registered. And so I'm thinking there would be like a new property for MCP server object that says like what type it is. Like this is one that is managed by the Wolfram engine versus one that's external.
Yeah, okay. Right. So create MCP server is what we need to do to create one that, well, I need to see what is actually inside create MCP server. So I think I get that. Now create MCP server. I see. It's an LLM configuration that the MCP server is a bundle of endpoints, and which in our world are specified by the tools.
Yeah, tools are the main thing that pretty much every MCP client knows what to do with. There's some other stuff that I added support in, but finding clients that actually do anything with it is pretty hard.
Right. Okay, but so basically for us, creating an MCP server is creating a bundle of endpoints. Those endpoints are a bunch of tools, and the names of those endpoints are specified in the LLM tools symbolic specification, correct?
Yeah. So it converts each LLM tool into the specification defined by MCP into like a JSON schema.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and then that's what's sent over.
In this case, to the MCP client, which is not us typically. I mean,
right.
You could loop back and use us if you really wanted to, as opposed to the register MCP server case, where you could in principle register one of our created MCP servers as an MCP server here. So in other words, instead of this URL, we could in principle have an MCP server object here, correct?
Well, I would think that create MCP server is effectively also registering it for you as well, because it's something that's in your local MCP service.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
You should just expose it for
But I mean, if you were to do it explicitly, you would say register MCP server of the MCP server object, correct?
Yeah, and so like if you were to pass that to something like LLM synthesized to use with tools, it would be inefficient because it would be, well, I guess we would probably add some shortcut code to not start another kernel.
I would think so.
Yeah.
But you might want to start another code because you might want to sandbox them apart.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's the kernel is going to be persistent anyway in these MCP tool, servers, right? That's the whole point
Yeah.
of a local MCP server is it's a persistent kernel. If it's a cloud MCP server, then you'll get, a fresh kernel every time. I think we're not going to try and maintain sessions there. Is that correct?
Right. Like I have I have a way of passing session information back and forth that I did for the cloud chat notebooks. It could possibly be used here as well.
So that will be an option for the remote MCP server, for not this remote MCP server, but remote Wolfram MCP server.
Yeah, maybe we'd have to really analyze like what types of resources it's consuming and things like
Right,
that.
but otherwise it's stateless and it's just
Yeah.
going to be every call on its own.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, looks good to me. So we can get this out pretty much immediately, yes? It just needs to be republished and so on.
Yeah, I'm gonna switch the publisher ID and republish it and all that. So at least, current Wolfram language users can get started right away using MCP. And then we can figure out installers and whatnot to get.
Right. And then we need the more consumerized version of this will be the first example of, Wolfram agent tools. The case of local MCP server, standalone local MCP server is probably what we should call it, because it's standalone in the sense that you don't need an existing Wolfram installation.
Yeah.
As opposed to one of
Definitely.
these things for Wolfram users.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else to figure out here?
I don't think so.
Great. All right. I look forward to playing with this. I mean, it's we've been talking about, and we've had neural implants, so to speak, for LLMs since the first few months of 2023. God, that's a long time ago now, isn't it? 2 and a bit years. Amazing. Okay. Well, anyway, this is the latest iteration, I guess. The slightly more streamlined iteration. And good stuff. I think, yeah, but by the way, I mean the prompting that's inside this and the ragging. I mean, this is going to, when you expose this to, for example, Claude Desktop, how does it know how to use this? Because it has a bunch of prompting.
Yes, and it's something I'm still iterating on. I do have it, I think, performing really well. So it's not going to be as powerful as like what we can do with Notebook Assistant, where we're doing like the sort of passive RAG type stuff automatically.
Mm-hmm.
So the RAG stuff basically has to be done through a tool call, and I have a bunch of prompting to really try to coerce the model into always doing that at the beginning, so it's getting the necessary information. That
Yes.
seems to be working pretty well. There are some edge cases where it doesn't use that I'm trying to tweak, but I'm not going to be able to get it to work everywhere. Like if you have a client that has a ton of MCP servers and tools, it's very unlikely to follow the instructions to the letter of what I've provided because they might compete with some other tool instructions. And
Yeah.
it could just be like a needle in a haystack type of thing.
Fair enough. Okay, well, this will be exciting to get out, and the first of a whole collection of agent tools. The only thing is to make it, our challenge is to make this stuff actually comprehensible to people. We
Yeah,
have pretty nice ways to do it, but it's like, can people understand what we have?
yeah. I mean, MCP is still relatively early and pretty much everywhere. It's kind of difficult to use. So I think we have something
Yeah, it's kind of
already pretty good here.
sounds good. All right. Well, thanks a lot. See you all soon.